Hi, my name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Museum Open House. This ongoing series features and highlights many of the outstanding museums and other cultural institutions. The main purpose of most programs is to inform viewers about current and upcoming exhibits, various programs, resources, and other opportunities that are available for the general public. Today via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guests Alison Drasner, Charan Devereaux, Adda Santos, and Phil Reavis Sr., all of whom are associated with the Somerville Museum and the current exhibition entitled Above and Beyond, The Remarkable Life of Somerville Olympian Phil Reavis. Above and Beyond showcases the life of Phil Reavis, a Somerville native, Olympic athlete, longtime educator, and one of the first people of color in Somerville with a public space named in his honor. The exhibition is a collaboration between the Somerville Museum and students from the Somerville High School Local History Club, led by history teacher Adda Santos. Alison serves as the assistant director of the Somerville Museum. Charan is a Somerville Museum Trustee and volunteer co-curator of the exhibition. And Phil Jr. is the son of Phil Reavis Sr., and he was also a volunteer on this project. During the program, we'll be finding out why and how the exhibition came about. We'll go on a behind-the-scenes tour, and in the process, come to better understand and appreciate Phil Reavis Sr.'s wide range of talents and accomplishments, as well as the noteworthy collaboration between the museum and the Somerville High School Local History Club. Let's start by meeting our guests and then finding out all about Above and Beyond, the remarkable life of Somerville Olympian Phil Reavis. Welcome. So delighted you're all able to be here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
I had the wonderful opportunity to visit the museum again and the exhibition a few days ago and came across very impressed with both Mr. Reavis and his multi-dimensional talents, but also about the collaboration, which I know is ongoing between the local history club and the museum. So I'm eager to hear more about those and have you inform viewers. Alison, before we get quite to that, I think it would be helpful for those maybe not as familiar, if you could just add a little bit more background information about Phil Reavis.
Sure. So Phil Reavis is, as we all are learning, a very important Somerville native, somebody who's done so much in his life and continues to impress everybody with his accomplishments. And, he's having the track field named after him at the high school, which is the high school is recently renovated over the past few years, as I've been living through as a teacher there. And it's an exciting project for everybody in Somerville, and it's the field is a beautiful field, and it's an exciting opportunity to honor somebody with this naming. And we're excited about sort of highlighting that and showcasing his life through this exhibit, and to really give the community an opportunity to learn more about him.
How did the exhibition come about?
Interesting. So Adda and Charan, feel free to jump in here. The basement project, we were planning on having another exhibition with Adda and her students this June. And we were talking about it probably about a year ago. And, realizing that the collections during our renovation project are off-site, we were talking about how we might make this work. And David Gus, who was also the curator of Penny Chronicles, which we talked about, I think, a year or two ago, he was in our meeting, and he's on the memorialization committee with the city, and had brought up this idea of Phil Reavis and the track field being named after him. And we got really excited about this idea and about Phil and learning more about him. And Adda and Charan, I think we just sort of all ran with it.
Nice. And what are the goals of the project?
The goals of the project are really, the work with the students is to really give them an opportunity to, I think I don't want to speak from Adda's point of view. So Adda, if you want to talk to the history aspect of this, But from the museum's point of view, we want to give them an opportunity to really understand and see firsthand what it's like to put together an exhibition and what it, the ongoing, operations of a museum, and have a better understanding of that. And then, of course, from the history point of view, Adda can certainly speak to that.
Adda, would you continue, please, by sharing a little bit about what the local history club is all about and the collaboration you've been having with the museum the past few years?
Sure. So the local history club started in 2012, over 10 years ago. And at first, we mostly did a lot of the city events where, Somerville would celebrate local history. So we would dress in period clothing, and there were several events like Goes to Somerville, and there are parades. And we didn't really do many exhibits at first. We mostly collaborated with the museum with that kind of activity. We did a little bit of research in school and talked about history, and but I've always wanted projects. So when the opportunity arose in 2020 to have a project with the museum, I thought of the basement. I've always wanted to go to the basement. They never allowed me to go. So I figured if we could come up with a project, they will let me go down there. So they did. So in 2020, I invited my students to go down, and we looked at the collection, and I told them to pick something that resonated with them, that they could identify with, and write a small research about it, why they picked it, how it relates to their life as Somerville residents now in the 21st century. And so I guess the overall goal in going into this wonderful project is to have students relate to history outside history classes. I'm an AP teacher, so it's a very rigorous class. There's a lot of papers and essays, and I wanted to be able to have students interact with history in a more relaxed way, where they had more ownership of what they researched. I love history, and as I said in a panel, the opening panel, mostly because of stories. I love stories and storytelling. So this project was perfect because it was an opportunity for them to do history and talk about this remarkable person who is just like any of us. He's not, I think I mentioned that on Saturday, he's not in the history books, but yet he is remarkable, like many other people who never get to be in history books, who do extraordinary things and don't get to be showcased, especially many people of color, especially in the city. So it took long enough, in my opinion, too long, to have any public space named after a person of color in Somerville. And I hope this is the beginning of many more people. And I have many other projects in mind with this kind of beginning with the Phil Reavis project. So, I think overall, it's just to get students to interact with history in their own terms, and not because they want a grade, but because they want to learn. They want to look at primary sources. And am I talking too much? So
not at all. Why don't you finish your thought there?
Yes, and so that's what it is. That's the main goal of the basement. I'm sorry, the local history club, and specifically this project that we had the honor to actually talk about somebody quite remarkable who affected many people's lives, and to have the students be part of history outside the classroom and textbooks.
Wonderful. That's very helpful additional information, and you're quite modest, because I know you and the students were recognized at the state level for the basement project. So congratulations on that as well.
If you don't mind me jumping in, and I'll just say that,
Charan, please do.
From a board member at the museum, and Adda Santos is a remarkable educator. She was chosen as the 2022 Massachusetts History Teacher of the Year. So we're really excited to work with her, and the project, the basement project from 2020, actually received a national award from the American Association for State and Local History. It received a Leadership in History award. And Adda was also given another award by the Massachusetts Commission for the Social Studies, where she was recognized as the secondary school social studies teacher of the year. So, you know, as you can hear when she speaks, she's all about her students and she's all about the history. And that's why it's so exciting for us to get to work with her and her students who are remarkable in talking about Phil Reavis Sr, who was an Olympic high jumper in 1956 and also coached Vietnam's Olympic team in 1964, among his many accomplishments.
Many indeed. Charan, before we move on, would you say a few words about what the collaboration was like between the museum staff and the students?
Sure. And I'd like to take this opportunity, since we haven't yet heard from Phil Reavis Jr., who's with us today, is that he was a really key part of this collaboration. The museum and the local history club and Adda Santos met weekly for many months, and Phil Reavis Jr. was often attending these meetings. He helped provide many images and pieces of memorabilia and awards that were used in the final exhibit. And he opened himself, you know, made himself available to the students for their questions, and did research of his own to also respond to their questions. So it really, you know, he was a key part of this collaboration, and we couldn't have done the exhibit without his assistance and support.
Most
Yes,
definitely.
I wanted to add that without Phil Jr., we couldn't have done any of this.
Yeah.
And many pictures and primary sources that he shared with us. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, Phil, welcome. Would you pick up on that and maybe provide a little more details of your role and contributions to the exhibition, please?
Sure. So, you know, I'm also very interested in history in general, but then also sort of become the family historian in a lot of ways, because I've inherited a lot of items from various family members over time. and I had the advantage of actually being sort of local and being able to sort of keep all this stuff, because Dad was constantly on the move, right? So you know, he would send stuff to grandmom, his mom, and when she passed, I sort of inherited a whole bunch of that stuff. And so part of this exhibit and the history telling for Dad was also part of my own journey, again, because I was separated from my dad for many, many years. And at some point, actually, when we were pregnant with my son, is when I started to think about sort of family history, right? That's what the only time you do. You kind of go around, you live your life, and then you go, oh, you know, I don't know any of the family stories. And so my wife was kind of instrumental in saying, hey, you know, why don't you start this letter correspondence? Because he was still in Macau at the time. And so we just sort of started this letters back and forth, and I started filling in the blanks, and then, you know, finding photographs and that sort of thing. So that was a really strong foundation for when this came up, because I'd already started a memoir that I was writing these stories of Dad and myself and my stepdad and, you know, family members, just to try to, and also creating family trees and things like that. That was kind of instrumental to this exhibit. So again, it was great to collaborate with the kids, and very similar to the letter writing thing that we had done previously when it came time for kids questioning of Dad. I almost became a go-between between the students and my dad, just to kind of make sure that all of the students' questions were answered, and so on. So
Now, I know your contributions about your dad and your whole family were incredibly moving part of the overall exhibition, and really appreciated that, and definitely helped provide the context for Phil Sr. and his later accomplishments. Alison, could you share, talking about more of the curating, the different sections? We have seen some related to family history. What other areas have the museum and the students collaborated on?
Yeah, so when we, the students and the museum staff and volunteers, and with Adda, of course, and Phil, most weeks, we met every week at the high school or the museum to discuss the project. And through that, the students, we got together and decided that we were going to split the exhibition up into sections, and that the students would own a section and then work with the museum volunteer staff kind of to help them with their research and writing. And so in doing so, they owned these sections, and they would research the sections, and then ask Phil Reavis and his father for some more information or clarification, etc. And so the different sections that we've come up with, as you saw, was the family history. The Phil Jr. had a space for his story with his father. Then we had a space for the grandfather and father section, which was a great section to sort of bring that all together. And then there were other sections about Phil's time at the Olympics, his time as a coach. So this is a picture of him, or the wall that represents the 1956 Olympics and his time at Villanova. And just as a side note, that bar, that high jump bar, is a representation that Phil Jr. created from scratch. So also Phil Jr. was very instrumental in the actual exhibition design and installation, which is no small feat, putting together an exhibition and actually putting it up on the walls. So he created that as a reproduction or recreation of what that would look like. And so that was one section that's really interesting section with a lot of the medals and the images of Phil Sr. when he was at Villanova and the Olympics. And then we moved on to the section where he was a coach in the 1964 Olympics. This is an image where we recreated the cover of the Sports Illustrated magazine that we all love so much, and put it up above the stairs, which in the museum we have this historic staircase by Charles Bulfinch, a famous architect, and it sort of graces the space. And so we put this above on the balcony, and we love it because it's kind of like, looks like he's jumping over the staircase. And so it was a nice sort of placement for it. There were also other sections about the Somerville Recreation Department and Phil's time in the Somerville High School and Somerville school systems, and his, when he spent time on the different fields and the different activities that Somerville used to do for kids. There was another section about his time in Macau and his, basically him as an artist and a traveler and a musician. And so that section really was a fun section and really creative section for the students to kind of figure out how to put a map on the wall, how to put the pins into old plaster and, different solutions there. And so the students really kind of got into that decision-making process. Then there were just some other sections at the beginning of the exhibit that described the field and an image of the field and the Reavis family's sort of initiative that they took in getting Phil's story told and recognized, and then also some history about the Basement Project collaboration with the students.
Nice, nice.
Oh, and then one other section, sorry, was the interview area. We had done an interview with Phil Reavis when he was last in town. And so there is a section where that interview is being played.
Wonderful. Adda, would you just say another word or two about the collaboration, how the students went about their research, what resources they used, the process it took from beginning to being installed at the museum today?
I think we started to meet in January, and then I think we had a meeting with Phil very early. It might have been even December, and we had thought about how can we make sure that we cover all the extraordinary aspects of Phil Reavis's life. So we started to do with childhood, Somerville High School, of course, the kids are very proud, Somerville High School students. Early years Olympics, family, father, grandfather. So then we had several students, and so we divided these aspects, these stages of Mr. Reavis's life into different groups of students, different students themselves. And then with the information that Phil had provided to us and the information that was available about Mr. Reavis, they put together their specific research. So if you
Wonderful.
look at the panels, you will see that every panel has a student name because that was the student responsible for that area, of course, with the help of Phil and museum staff. They were all paired with museum staff, which are very, very helpful. So they kind of have, and again, I bring up the ownership, like they did this history. They look into primary sources, they look into secondary sources, and they created these panels with the help
Wonderful.
of, yeah. So to me, that's really like doing history. And then once, they email Mr. Reavis in Macau, and like Phil Reavis Jr. said, he was kind of like the mediator. All the emails went through him as well. Once the information came back, they put together the research with the help of the staff, and then it was time to do printing and putting together the exhibit. It was a lot of fun. I loved it. The other day I said it was fun and people thought I was being sarcastic, but I really, really loved it. And then, all of a sudden it's done and it's here. So
I know, I mean, incredible example of authentic learning. So congratulations again to you
thank
and
you
your
so much.
students, as well as the collaboration. Phil, we see in the background the section, your dad as a musician and poet. Would you just share a few words about his talents in those areas, please?
Sure, and that's kind of weaved into the exhibit also. Again, this exhibit is as much a testament to not only Dad as an extraordinary person, but also just how extraordinary Somerville was at that point in supporting kids in education at the time. And so sort of the two major movements in his life, being an athlete, all started at the local Shaw playground where it was taught to high jump. And he really just sort of latched onto that as a skill and propelled him, basically to the Olympics, right? But then the other part was that in band, instruments were freely given if kids were interested in learning an instrument. And so, he has this story of, neighborhood kids bringing home instruments. Oh, I want one, so he sort of goes up to the school and tries to get a saxophone, and there's none around, and he only gets a clarinet, but then he sort of latches onto that, really starts a lifelong friendship actually with that one instructor that I think was consulting with the school system at that time, who happened to be a jazz musician himself. And they created a lifelong friendship, and he got like a summer job to get enough money to buy his own saxophone, and sort of the rest is history. So he sort of latched onto that and did that. And then he had some influences with teaching along the way that sort of got him into English, teaching English, and then, into his own poetry and art.
And he still remains an active musician, still playing jazz. And just to wrap up that thought about poetry, because that's another dimension showcased with a wonderful book that's on display.
Right. So I think, Macau became, I think, his real sort of home, and where his spirit took off. And so, a lot of the book of poetry is about Macau and his experience there because of that. And I think, I don't know too much of Dad's earlier poetry, but I mean, it's really sort of blossomed when he was in Macau, and he just started to talk about and write about, the exotic nature of being in the Orient and just his love of it all. So
Nice. Alison, what's been some of the reaction and feedback? I know it's just been on view for a week or so, but what's been some of the reaction and feedback so far, observations that you have? Charan, if you want to add as well.
A couple of things. We've gotten some really great feedback on Facebook and social media in general. People who have come to the show and have, were a student of Phil's and, hadn't seen him in many years or reconnected. And then also just general community feedback has been really positive. Everybody who's seen the show has really enjoyed it and learned something, and I think felt more connected to this area that we all live in now. So, again, it's only been open for 4 days, so we're still gauging all of that feedback, but it's been really great so far.
But our opening and the initial tour that we did of the exhibit we had huge attendance, and it was wonderful to see so many people walking through those doors to see this exhibit and to, hear this powerful story. And that's why we're here as a museum. Like, it's just so rewarding to, see people engage so personally and powerfully with this story.
Wonderful. And Adda, just in a very few words, what's been the students' reaction and feedback, and how do they feel about this accomplishment?
I think they feel very happy and proud, and I think they're already talking about the next one. They wanted to do one next year, and I said, well, maybe in a couple of years, because a couple of them are graduating, so they're done. And then I have a couple, 3 actually, who are juniors, so they won't be able to participate in the next one. But I think they just, they all kind of like history already. Some of them have been my students in the classroom, but I think they want to continue to do research. I feel like sometimes in the middle of the night, I wake up with an idea and they wake up with ideas. So it just, like, once you do something that goes well and touches people, like, you feel inspired to do some more. So it's
most definitely. You're a terrific role model indeed.
Thank you so much.
Alison, in wrapping up in the minute or so we have left, would you just highlight some current upcoming programs and events for us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a shorter exhibit. It's a community collaboration for us. So it's the month of June. So this week we're open for regular hours, Saturday and Sunday. And then on Monday, Juneteenth, from 12 to 3, we're open with special hours. We're going to have a poetry reading with Phil Sr. and some integration with the students and maybe a poetry slam with some students. So we're working on that. And then we have a closing reception on Saturday, July 8th from 12 to 3. But during this exhibit, we're trying out Sunday hours. So it's a shorter exhibit, but there's some time to see it. So definitely encourage everybody to come out and check our website for open hours and for those events that I just mentioned. And we're really excited.
Terrific, terrific. Well, unfortunately, we've come to the end of our show. Want to thank all of you for being here, for your contributions. Pass our regards on to the students, and most notably, Phil Reavis Sr. and what he was able to provide Somerville, and in turn, this exhibition. Look forward to attending other events in the future for sure.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be on the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
thank you.
Also want to thank those of you watching for joining us, and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.